Greetings and welcome to the Halloween edition of the Sliders Review. And I'm here today to talk to you about stars that have starred twice in two completely different R.L. Stine projects. So growing up, I was a huge R.L. Stine fan and still till this day. And I've seen many of his projects. And for the longest time, I always assumed because many fans, they want to see like older Goosebump stars star in some of his newer projects. That's always been like a huge thing for like fans. But for the most part, it's just never really happened, or has it? Many people didn't even realize that like a former Goosebump star from back in the 90s has actually starred in one of R.L. Stine's future projects. I knew this one actor was in The Haunting Hour and in the Goosebumps movie that came out in the 2000s, but I never realized that this other actress was actually the first person to actually appear in two completely different R.L. Stine projects. For most people, this is not a big deal, but for like a huge R.L. Stine fan, a huge Goosebump fan, a Goosebumper for life, it's pretty big and everything because, this was our everything growing up. Goosebumps, man, the books, the television show, and eventually the movies and stuff. And so, when it comes to Goosebumps, that was actually my kind of like my introduction into like horror, I guess one could say. Like slashers, it came from like the Scream movie and stuff. But when it came to actual horror, I wasn't allowed to watch scary movies growing up. So, of course, being a kid and a teenager, then when Goosebumps came around, this was like the perfect thing for me to watch. Plus, my mom had no idea. She bought me the books and stuff, so she probably would never had cared, if I was watching the Goosebumps show. But since it was aimed towards kids and teens, it was like the perfect thing for young people getting into horror. It was fun, it was exciting, it was thrilling, there was cool twists. It had its cheesy factor to it. It had its creepy factor, and for some people, I can't talk. For some people, it had its scary factor and stuff. It will always be like near and dear to that of my heart. And then, like many years later, I watched like another one of his shows. And he's created a whole bunch based on his books. He never writes any of the television shows, but other people adapt his work. And like I said, he's had plenty of shows. Of course, there's the original Goosebumps show, the one that so many people love, and still till this day, who live in Canada, they travel all around Canada trying to find the locations of like all the episodes because they had such a unique look to them. That's one of the things I love about the original Goosebumps show. Next, he tried Fear Street to make it into a television show, but it didn't get past the unaired pilot. I watched the unaired pilot on YouTube. It's horrible. It's okay. Like, it's not bad. It's okay. I just don't like it. Next was The Nightmare Room, and I actually never knew about this show until about 10, maybe 15 years ago when I was looking for stuff to watch around the Halloween time. And I found this like on YouTube. It's okay. Like, it only lasted for one season. The beginnings of the episode started off great, but then it's towards the end is where it kind of lost me because they became kind of stale towards the end. But this show wanted established young kid stars that were up and coming who appeared in bigger stuff. So no longer are like Goosebumps where you have like a bunch of new up and comers or a bunch of people who just, came here to do like one episode and never acted again. Here were like established people like Shia LaBeouf, Amanda Bynes, um, what's his name from the Amanda show? Drake Bell, the Sprouse twins, Frankie Muniz and everything. And that one Wayans family member, I forget his name. He was on the Wayans show. Like they had some pretty big names. Then there was the Haunting Hour movie that later led into the show. Personally, it's not really my favorite. It's just kind of blah. But, I want to rewatch it just to see if it still feels the same way it did when I watched it a long time ago. However, it's very hard to find on streaming. At some point in time, he started these direct to like DVD things called Ghostly Mostly or Mostly Ghostly. And I've never seen them. I tried to watch one and I could not even finish it. I could only get through like the first 3 minutes. It felt too juvenile and kiddie. But I think there are like three movies altogether. Then there is like my second favorite, The Haunting Hour. And this is what I watched. I believe I might have been in college or I was done and just coming out of college or something like that. But I remember it was in my adult years. And I originally, I thought this was better than Goosebumps, at least by the first season and the first couple of episodes of the second season. But after those, like the second half of the second season, on into the fourth season, I started disliking this show. Just like with the Nightmare Room, the beginning of the episodes will start off great, but then towards the end, they kind of went stale. One reason was because of the fact they kept trying to teach a moral lesson in each episode by this time. A lot of kids' horror shows were doing that, and I just don't appreciate that. Ain't nobody here to learn no lesson when you want to be scared. And plus, I guess censors got to it because they're like, man, might be a little too scary for kids and stuff like that. But anyways, and then I started to realize Goosebumps, even though it was outdated and cheesy, it was still a heck of a lot better for like location, music, and just overall storytelling. At some point in time, Monsterville came out. I've never saw it. At least I don't think I did. I don't know, but I don't know anything about it. Of course, we had the two Goosebump movies, which is more like Jumanji meets Goosebumps and stuff. It does not revolve around none of the books. It just has the movie monster, or the book monster characters in the movie. Then there was his adult show called Eye Candy. I've only watched either one episode or half of one episode. I could not finish the rest. This was a bit different. This was more of like a thriller type thing. I believe the premise is like a young woman who gets stalked by some person on the internet. So it's a completely different thing than what you know from like Goosebumps and The Haunting Hour and The Nightmare Room, where everything's more supernatural. This is more like true like type crime. It only lasted for one season and it starred Victoria Justice, and I just remember just not liking it. Although I'm very curious now. Just Beyond only lasted for one season and it was on Disney Plus, and I flat out do not like it. It's kind of like The Haunting Hour, but just lamer. At some point in time, Netflix did Fear Street, which was a trilogy, and it was really, really awesome. I can't wait for the next trilogy to come out. It's supposed to come out sometime either this year or next. Then Disney Plus tried it again, and this time they decided, hey, we're gonna reboot Goosebumps, and we're gonna reboot it in a very lame kind of way. Once again, not adapting the books, just taking the monsters from the books and turning it into a young adult YA novel type crap with lots of drama, and I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. The first is actually Madison Pettis. I think that's how you say her name. I'm not really sure. She first starred in the R.L. Stine property called Mostly Ghostly back in 2008, I believe it was, when she played a little ghost girl. And she played in the first two movies, but then was recast in the third because they aged her character up. Doesn't make no sense if she's a ghost, but I've never seen those movies, so I don't know what it's about. But I just know she played like a little ghost girl and stuff like that. But like, I think it was in 2008. I'm not really sure. But anyway, later on, she was in The Haunting Hour. And when she was in The Haunting Hour, she was in an episode called The Black Mask. It was a pretty cool episode. It was mysterious, kind of creepy and everything. Like a bunch of kids who went to this abandoned house. They put on a black mask and they saw all these like horrifying images and they wanted to like save these kids, right? But the kids looked like it was back in the old days. So they tried to find a way to send a message. It turns out they were the kids in like, the messages and in the imagery and stuff. Reason for that is because they're not time travelers. They just put on some old fashioned timey clothes and they tried to reenact the thing hoping they could send a message back in the past. But then there was like this groundskeeper type guy and who was deaf and needed a hearing aid. And so basically what it is, if the kids were never there to begin with, this man would have died in an accident. But because he saw them, he rescued them, and inadvertently it rescued him. It's a little tricky. But yeah, she is technically the very, very first to do the whole crossover type thing to a different R.L. Stine property. Brendan Fletcher. So, this dude is back from the original Goosebumps show back in the good old 90s and stuff. I think the episode he was in came out in 1995. And it was, let's see, Werewolf of Fever Swamp. It was a two-parter, and he played a boy named Grady who had to move out to the countryside and did not want to. He whined and complained over and over. He was miserable. He ended up meeting like a friend named Will and then found a dog named Vandal. And so basically there's a legend of a werewolf that's in this swamp and everything like that. Things start to get a little crazy. His dad's livestock end up dead, and then he ends up getting chased by like a werewolf, and so does his mom and daughter, and no, mom and sister, and his dog ended up running away and saving his life from a werewolf that turned out to be his best friend, Will, and everything. At the end, it's debatable if he really is a werewolf or not, but who really knows, you know what I'm saying? And so that's a really cool episode. I remember from back in the day. It was pretty thrilling. And they're like, wow, dead animals in a Goosebumps show of all things. And so, like, I remember him when he was in, what was it? The Adventures of Shirley Holmes, where he played Stink. And he was a bit older and stuff. Now, like, I didn't even know that, like, he was the dude from The Haunting Hour in season 4, episode 8, which I'm gonna review later on for Halloween. I'm trying to think. What was it? Okay, season 4, episode 8, Lots of Luck, where he played like a leprechaun. So basically, he's an evil leprechaun that gives a person 3 wishes, but there's always a price that comes with a wish. If you wish for something good, something bad gonna happen to somebody you love. And then towards the end, he ended up stealing a boy's soul. I had no idea this was him. Like, cause many years have passed since like, the 90s and stuff, and he has longer hair now. I'm watching the show back in, what was it, Reacher season 3, and he was in that. He starred in a bunch of other stuff too. He's one of the very rare original Goosebumps like actors that still acts today. Then there is Catherine McNamara. So She was in an R.L. Stine movie called Monsterville. I've never seen that, and I have no idea what's it about. But she was in The Haunting Hour in an episode called The Worry Men. And I remember it had to do something about an episode with like her father and these little trinket type things that are called The Worry Men. I don't remember anything else from that episode, but yeah, she's another person who has crossed over from two different R.L. Stine properties that I completely forgot about. And last that I can tell is Dylan McNetty. So Dylan McNetty, I first saw him in The Haunting Hour. And in The Haunting Hour, oh, by the way, what's his name? Brendan, I think he was in 2014, The Haunting Hour. Anyway, I first saw this dude in The Haunting Hour. He was in two episodes, actually. He was in Brushes with Madness, which is a very dark, very good, very creepy episode. I mean, my God, it's good. For a kid's show, oh my God, that was dark. Basically, he's like a stan, a huge, like, fan of this comic book artist. And so when he went to go meet him at a convention, he made a fool of himself, irritated the artist, and the artist left, and he forgot to grab his paintbrushes. So he was going to give them to him, but was unable to, and decided, you know what? Like, this person who he's a huge fan of is a huge jerk who doesn't like his fans and doesn't like being around people. So he keeps his brushes, but then he becomes possessed and he start painting stuff on like his walls and the house and stuff like that. Everything he paints comes like true. And he's painting like a slasher and stuff. And so this is creeping his friend out because she's like, why did you paint me? And why did you have like the killer kill me and everything? And so like, like she's freaked out. She gets kidnapped. He goes to the dude's house. It turns out that the killer of this thing he's been painting is himself. And he's going to kill himself and his best friend. Turns out in reality, like I said, he was possessed by the paintbrushes. It was actually the comic book artist that was painting this whole thing to begin with because he got sick and tired of his like overly jealous like fan like irritating him and constantly emailing him and stuff. So he wanted to get rid of the boy and everything. That is some dark mess. Now he was in another one. I forget what it's called. It had something to do with like a band. I particularly did not like that episode whatsoever. And so, like, later on, this dude starred in the first Goosebumps movie. And I thought, oh wow, that was pretty cool. Like I assumed at the time, like, oh wow, he was like the first crossover from like, an RL Stein property. But it turns out, nah, it was actually Madison and stuff. So yeah, these are the only three that I've known of that ever cross over to different R.L. Stein properties. Maybe, just maybe, somebody who had like a smaller role in one of the episodes probably crossed over into another property, but so far I can't find nobody that has done that. But this is like really neat. Like if you're a huge like R.L. Stein fan, a Goosebump fan, it's always fun to like know this little knowledge and stuff. That wasn't that spooky. Alright, well, I shall talk to y'all later. Bye.